All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rich. We have a very special guest on tonight, a very active member of the Illinois Green Party and the Green Party nationally, Chris Blankenhorn. Chris, what's up? How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. You were on once before, had a great time. This is going to be a good one because we get to talk about things that I can't talk about with other people. So, why don't you start off by just saying, kind of give us a little bit of a history of how you got involved in the Green Party, why you got involved in the Green Party, and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I first got involved with the state Illinois Green Party in 2013. I went down to Carbondale, Illinois, for a state meeting. I was brought in by AJ Reed, who I had
Oh yeah,
met during the Occupy movement in Springfield, Illinois. So AJ brought me down to Carbondale. I still vividly remember that meeting because I lived in Carbondale for 4 years. I didn't live there at the time. I'm an SIU dropout. Um, but we went down there and we were eating lunch, and it was in, I believe, March. So it was spring but chilly, but it was a sunny day. And someone from upstate, we were at like an Elks Lodge or something, and they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna go down to the lake and put my feet in and just hang out during lunch. Does anyone want to come with?" And everyone local yelled no,
don't do that.
because we were on Crab Orchard Lake, which is a Superfund site.
Oh,
They made depleted uranium rounds for the Bradley fighting vehicle on that lake. Um, and they made a whole bunch of other, there was a munitions plant for decades. And so we were literally meeting on a Superfund site, um, which
good
is
lord.
a very apt place for a Green Party to have a meeting.
Sure.
So that was my first introduction. Um, I didn't really get heavily involved until 2015. Jill Stein came to Springfield and had an event, and I helped organize a meet and greet afterwards. And that kind of catapulted me into working with people nationally, and led to, in 2016, in August of 2016, I was elected a national co-chair. At the time, I was the youngest national co-chair in Green Party history, unseating AJ, who had been the previous youngest co-chair. And then I was unseated the next year by a good friend of mine, Michael Dennis. I still tell people I'm the youngest co-chair to have completed their term,
Oh well, there you go.
um,
I mean,
because AJ resigned, and then Michael Dennis got a job at Nation Builder, which is a database platform that the Green Party uses, and they
oh,
weren't allowed to, be in leadership of a customer, basically.
I mean, a conflict event.
Um,
Okay, sure.
it makes sense, right? It makes sense. So they had to step down
Yeah.
too. So I still brag that I'm still the youngest to do it. So I served until 2018 as national co-chair. I've been in the Illinois Green Party leadership since 2017. And then in 2020, I was in the original, like, kind of formation group, that became the Howie Hawkins campaign. Um, that was people I'd worked with for years. We brought on Howie, we brought in Angela, and then I was the systems and tech director and the social media director for the campaign. Um,
That must have been pretty intense, and that sounds like pretty kind of high level responsibilities there. Just kind of vaguely thinking what like a campaign is, and I mean, okay,
yeah, it's
yes,
a lot. It's a lot, especially at the grassroots levels.
sure.
We had a campaign where, from the beginning, we didn't expect that we would be able to pay living wage salaries to many people, right? Where we don't Greens don't raise millions and millions and millions of dollars. When Jill did, she mainly did it from Democrats for the recount, right? So, not since Nader probably have we had like really heavy fundraising. Jill was good for Green, but not really heavy.
All right.
Um, so, even going in, that you're only going to get a stipend if you're lucky. Um, and it was one of those things where I was a preschool teacher. Now I'm a stay-at-home dad. But um, when COVID happened, my preschool got shut down, and then I was doing as much as you can, twice weekly Zooms with my kids and teaching science and stuff. But um, a couple weeks after we got shut down, I wake up one morning and Bernie dropped out of the race. So things completely changed at that point. We all expected Bernie to drop out. We all expected Bernie to endorse Biden. It's what he said on day one, right? Bernie Sanders hasn't really lied to people. He's been very honest in both of his campaigns that he's going to endorse the Democratic frontrunner, and he's there to move the conversation left. So we expected that would happen not in April. I don't think anyone saw him dropping out before Super Tuesday, or right after. I don't remember when it was, but so then the job of social media director just completely changed. And if you look at a lot of social media marketing, trainings and things like that, they're geared towards organizations that have money, and they're heavily weighted on just getting addicted to ads. That wasn't something we could afford, right? I don't know the 2020 numbers, but I know in 2016, Hillary and Trump both spent about 80 million on Facebook ads alone, right? So we can't compete with that.
Wow.
And the way the algorithms work, that once you start doing it, you're just addicted. They're just going to start, you're going to have to constantly pay. So we went, we were organic all the way. And in the end, we ended up being a middle of the road in terms of votes. But we were the best in green history on votes for dollar, in terms of fundraising. And it's like, that is a testament to, what we did with social media, how we were able to fundraise on it, how we were able to, utilize phone banking and things, because obviously 2020 required a huge pivot because of COVID. And 2020 was so in 2016, the Democrats decided, let's elevate the Greens, right? Jill and Ajamu got on CNN and NPR and all these outlets, and they're like, let's get them. We're gonna put them up, tee them up, and then we're gonna just nail them, and nobody's gonna like these jokers. But what they found out, or what they should have already known, was that our policies are popular, right? Yeah. So what ended up happening was they thought that they would, put Jill up there, put Ajamu up there, and discredit them, but they ended up giving them a platform, right? And they ended up getting, a post-nadir, the best result we've ever seen with the Greens at about 1.5%. So 2020 came, and they went the opposite route, right? Last time they elevated us, it backfired. So this time it was a media blackout, and Jill and Ajamu both said it on our when we did a live stream on election night, right? Like, the blackout we faced was like something that Greens have never seen. Even progressive media didn't want to talk to us. They were all, most of them were on board with the anyone but Trump train. Right. So it was very difficult, and we had to do it more grassroots through social media and sharing.
Wasn't there a letter sent from some group of people, including signed by Noam Chomsky, to the Green Party to please don't do you remember that?
Yeah.
I know my friends and I, who are avid Chomsky fans, and on a multitude of levels, including linguistics, were absolutely just baffled that he would do that.
The one that hurt me was Kathy Kelly signed one. And Kathy Kelly is from Voices for Creative Nonviolence in Chicago. She's an amazing woman, amazing peace activist. When we started bombing Afghanistan after 9/11, she went to Afghanistan. That was, and so, sought to help and serve people in a humanitarian way from the violence we inflicted, the damage we inflicted. And I've worked with her a number of times in the past. I actually emailed her and was like, that hurts, Kathy. That's the crazy thing, right? Noam Chomsky's an academic, right? And I'm someone who's always I've felt that Chomsky is valuable because he brings these, kind of leftist theory, bottom leftist theory to Americans, to, people in the US. But I don't find him to be overly unique or brilliant, right? Like I have other authors that I would go to, but they're way deeper than Americans are ever going to read, right? So like Chomsky's like the U.S. access point for leftist theory, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's an academic. He's got a comfortable life being an academic, right? He doesn't have a history of organizing and action and doing. He says things and he tries to lead as like an academic moral leader, not someone who actually does, goes out and get, tries to.
I think back in the Vietnam days he protested,
Yeah.
but not in our life. No.
Yeah, and he's very old now.
I've seen him recently. He's slowed down a lot. It's sad to watch. But
yeah, but so I'm not overly surprised when someone that is from a more comfortable, probably upper middle class area is like, and who's not engaged in the front line of the movements, but is kind of in a big picture, opinion space. I'm not overly surprised with that they send that letter, right? Okay. But the Kathy Kellys, those are the ones that, and the peace activists in general. Biden has a 50-year history, right? A very clear record that you can waffle on a lot of things, but peace isn't one of them, right? Like there's no way that is a peace candidate. And that's something I think we need to, as Greens, we need to be able to start articulating more, is we need to revert our political culture in this country, because right now we have like a negative voting culture. We vote against things we don't like. It doesn't really matter what we're voting for as long as it's against the thing we don't like. And that has had very, very, very bad results. And I mean, logically, that can only have very, very bad results. So we really need to have a positive voting culture where we're voting for the things that we want, right? Like over 90% of Democrats want Medicare for all, but they all voted for someone who doesn't, right? How much of the peace movement ended up backing Biden, right? Even though there was no way any of them thought that he was, a peace candidate, or in some ways, I don't play the people are better, or Trump or Biden are better or worse. They're awful, in their own unique ways, but I don't think there's a hard case for Biden being more of a peace candidate than Trump.
Trump might have been a bit more of a peace, a non-military.
It's one of those like, what does peace mean when you're the leader of the world's biggest bully? But
exactly. Means a big stick. It's too bad how and frustrating to a certain degree, knowing that individual people don't vote third party because they think that no other people will vote third party. Like that's really about it. Like they're all just talking themselves out of it because they think that nobody else will do it, but they're not doing it because they don't think you're doing it, and you're not doing it because you don't think It's just everybody for one election just vote third party.
Yeah.
Okay. Just do it. Okay. And everything will change.
Yeah. Well, and there's two parts, in terms of how I look at that, and one of them is, and I really actually love that this works so well. I hate the term chicken and egg, because it was an egg. A proto chicken laid an egg, and inside that was the mutated animal that we called the chicken. The egg.
Oh yeah, no.
The proto chicken
biology classes. Yes. The clear answer is the egg. If the egg had to come first, guys. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but to use the colloquialism, it's a chicken and egg type of situation, right? People have to support us, or we won't, achieve the success that is needed to have mass success, right? We need more of the people that are on the fence and are pulled back by coercion and extortion, which are the Democrats' primary campaign tools, right? That they get pulled back. If they stay over, if Bernie Sanders, supporters in 2016 and had en masse voted Green Party, we would have gotten 5%. We would have had millions of dollars for 2022. And we might have been able to, if we couldn't challenge, we probably could have pulled the conversation left, because Biden would have been in the race with someone saying we want Medicare for all, and 90% of Democrats want Medicare for all. So if there's someone in the race that's on the airwaves that's saying it and is pulling attention from him, he's going to have to support it, right? And the same for things like the Green New Deal. He's going to have to at least, and that's the thing about a slogan, right? He can say he supports Medicare for all and only give a public option, and Democrats will applaud. And the same goes for Green New Deal. He can say he supports the Green New Deal and then support what the Democrats put up, which is mainly corporate tax breaks, right? It's paying corporations to be better out of public funds. So it can change a lot, right? But I like that I hate chicken and egg so much, because the answer isn't the question, or the thought shouldn't be, oh, if they would just do it. The answer is always organizing. That's the egg, right? The answer is organizing, on the ground, local organizing. That's how we have to grow. That's how it's how we get more people. It's how we build the mass. It's not tweeting on, or I don't know. We must probably going to change what it's called, but it's not tweets and things like that. It's hitting the pavement, getting involved with your community, building relationships. Because the thing is, the idea of, if people just supported our platform, but political party platforms are bullshit, right? I mean, people aren't stupid. Non-voters aren't stupid, and they're not apathetic. They're alienated, and they're tired of no one representing them, and they're tired of voting for people that are going to oppress them. So when you go to a non-voter as a Green and you say, we're going to Medicare for all and healthcare, we're going to get the climate, the eco-socialist Green New Deal will create 38 million new jobs, and they'll be good paying jobs. We're going to bring back manufacturing. Who the hell are you? And those are some pretty words, but how are you going to do it?
Yeah, right? Show me. Don't tell me. Show me.
And I've worked as a community organizer and knocked doors in working class neighborhoods and organized in working class neighborhoods, and people know, right? And so as Greens, if we want our platform to mean anything, we need, when we knock on their door, to talk about, hey, our presidential candidate, can you show up? We need, when they open the door, they go, oh, hey, Chris, because they know me, because I've been there, because I've worked with them, right? Because they've seen me around, because they know the name of the organization, because somebody on their block is in the organization, right? And I had someone in an organizing workshop ask about targeting, and I said, at the state that the Green Party is in right now, your next door neighbor, that's where you start. You knock their door, and then their neighbor, and then their neighbor. And each one of you in the town, do that. Don't transplant into a place and ride in on a white horse like you're going to save this, frontline community, right? You need to start with your community, start building power, listening, and figuring out what our problems is. And, in those situations as an organizer, your job is to understand how the big picture of capitalism, the big picture of oppression and exploitation, the big picture of the two-party system. And when someone says, man, our infrastructure sucks, in my hometown, I can say, did you know that every year our public works department and our police department put in for the same amount, essentially the same amount of money? The police department gets 99% and the public works gets 30%. Our infrastructure is underfunded because we are overfunding policing. Right. And now we've connected to this big picture, and it's not just the cops in my neighborhood are fucking shitty, right? They're also the reason the roads suck, right? And they're also the reason that, all of a sudden it branches. And it's not just about an interpersonal thing, it's about a systemic thing. Right. When they say, I can't get a good job, that's when we can, we can connect to these bigger issues, right? Well, what is the government funding right now? What are public-private partnerships and stuff, right? But they're just funneling public money into private profits. They're not funding, actual development that stays in.
Right. Yeah. No. Okay. Well, I mean, that's. And I wanted to ask you, since you were involved in like the presidential level of it all. Do you know? Has there been any attempt to reach out to Bernie Sanders to kind of get him to join our team? Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. Greens have been reaching out to Bernie for a decade plus.
And
Um,
what's it? You know what his response is? I mean, he's got
he
to
just
agree with our platforms at least.
he
You
just
know.
doesn't respond, right?
Okay.
That it gets left on red, right? But then yeah, the reality is that Bernie's power is tied and has been for decades to the Democrats, right? As soon as he joined the U.S. House, sorry, as soon as he was elected to the U.S. House, he made a deal with the Democrats that he would caucus with them, he would take committee assignments from them, and they wouldn't endorse Democratic challengers when he ran as an independent. And that carried through, right? He's he's the finance committee chair or something right now, right?
Yes.
And and I have plenty of criticisms of Bernie Sanders, but from that position, he can actually shape policy,
Yeah.
right? So there can be positive things said for the tactic that he's using. He hasn't shaped policy, right? Very much. He tends to, he has a bad history of talking right, of talking left, and voting right. When it comes time to do it, he toes the line because his power is tied up with the Democratic Party. And at this point, it doesn't matter. At this point would be the time, right? He I hope I hope people don't try to get him to run again. I said it in 2020, and in 2024 even more. I hope his supporters don't try to kill him, right? Because running a good campaign is grueling,
I could
um,
imagine.
and
Yeah.
and
Didn't he have a
he's
heart attack the last one?
yeah, and we need to be in. He needs to be focusing on shifting, passing the reins and developing the next generation and things like that. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the left and progressive energy in this country ends up, right? And engages with DSA or the Sunrise Movement, and are funneled. That energy is funneled, through that not-for-profit, um, community org complex back into the Democratic Party. So in ways, he's doing what we'd hoped he wouldn't. You hope for a Mike Gravel situation, right? Where at the end he's like doing what's right.
Right. Yeah. I remember. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That guy from Alaska.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. The kind of the quirky guy, but yeah, no, he was cool. He was intense. Um. Well, okay. Well, that I didn't know if there was any attempts there.
yeah. And I
Um.
mean, and we reached out in 2020. You have to. And the problem is, we say, we want to talk to you about working together. And it happened with Jill, and it happened with us, and then people immediately go, um, you know, you're going to give him the top of the ticket, right? And it's like, no, we have a democratic process, right? There's states have primaries. It was incredibly unique in both 2020 and 2016 to see burners who were traumatized by a lack of democracy come in and expect no democracy in the Green Party. Like that's how much cognitive, like that's how internalized just our anti-democratic model of government is.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. That's
And they didn't understand that that they were really focused on Bernie. But it's like we have Greens who've been Greens for years who voted in primaries, and you know
I have
they
this
let
image
it.
of like a rescue dog that when the new owners try to pet them, and they because they've been battered for so long. That's terrible. That sort of conditioning.
Yeah,
Um, that might have been too strong of an analogy, but anyway. Okay, so next year we have an election this year, more local than other stuff. But next year we're going to have to. So the parties are going to have to put up a candidate, right? Are we talking
yeah.
about any Green Party?
The campaigns will start. In the Howie Hawkins campaign, we immediately filed for 2024.
Oh, so
But
he's running again. Okay.
that doesn't mean he's running. It
Oh,
was just the
okay.
easiest way to keep moving,
Gotcha. Okay.
right? Because the way that financial campaign finance works, like the day the campaign ends, like new bank, like that banking that account's done, right? The campaign's over. You can still pay debts and go through things like that, but you're not supposed to be forward thinking. Things like continuing to pay for a website, right? You're not
Sure.
supposed to be doing that kind of stuff. The stuff that in the systems, as systems director, were falling for toward me, but that's the kind of stuff that we needed to keep doing and wanted to keep organizing around. So we immediately filed, and Howie said, we'll figure it out later. What we want to focus on is, local organizing and education projects. And Howie's actually running for governor in New York right now. They just started petitioning, and he is running for governor, and Gloria Matera is his lieutenant governor candidate. So they've got to collect 42,000 signatures in 45 days. They've got to double it to beat challenges. They've got lawsuits because this is a new law that cost them the ballot line. Had they not changed the law, we would have kept the ballot line. But during COVID, the Democrats in New York pushed through a ballot access law that made it harder for third parties. The Greens weren't the target; the Working Families Party was. But
really? Okay.
So he's doing that right now. So I don't think we'll see any kind of decision from him till 2020, early 2023, and that's generally when you'll start seeing. By summer 2023, most campaigns will probably be running. So we'll just see. Right now, what we've been doing, we announced out of the after the campaign that we were forming an organization called the Green Socialist Organizing Project. We've done that. We've been operating since the end of the campaign. We've got a few different areas of work. I run the education working group. We're in the process right now of turning it into a 501c4, which is you can't get tax deductible donations, and you can engage in politicking, partisan politicking. It just can't be most of what you do. But so yeah, that's what we've been organizing through. In 2021, we had Howie's podcast that had something like 47 episodes plus a bunch of special episodes. We did a bunch of education work, trainings on different things. We had programming for Women's History Month, for Black History Month. We did stuff for May Day. We had special live streams about the Amazon organizing project and Stop Asian Hate, for example. And the reason that we formed the organization was because most of us are, at least I'm probably the newest to the party, out of our core organizing group in the campaign, and I've been in the party almost a decade. And so what we wanted to start filling holes that we saw, right? And a big one was education. And for me personally, what I do when I burn out is I start running an education program. It's what happened during Occupy, when our Occupy kind of shifted gears and started, testifying in committee hearings and stuff at the Capitol building, because we are in the Capitol, so it's easy for us to, and we do have members who are lobbyists, or who are work in the government, and that's how they think. And so we ended up shifting that way. And so while they were doing that, I was doing teach-ins on, revolution and insurrection, and Kathy Kelly was doing a teach-in for me. And, I was at the University of Illinois Springfield at the time. So I was just trolling through the radical professors. Like, I need you to teach about how the legal system perpetuates inequality. We had an amazing one about how Occupy was the radical descendant of ACT UP, which was an HIV/AIDS organization, an LGBTQIA organization during the AIDS crisis, and she was trying to teach us, like, as Occupy, how we should replicate their model, because they were amazing at being able to hit different topics, but always connect it back to HIV, the HIV crisis, right? And the AIDS crisis. Wow. So it's like they'd be at Wall Street one day and they'd be talking about, big pharma, and then they'd be at the CDC, and then they'd be at the White House. And no matter what they did, they were always able to pull it back to that common thing. And her kind of critique of Occupy was, you haven't found your common string, right? Like the main string Occupy had was greed, but greed's a human emotion that everyone has, right? It's self-interest in a way. What we call greedy is just slanted to, what's considered socially too far. But when I skipped an Occupy GA because I had to write a paper, that was greedy. That was self-interest, right? I put my future and my grades above going to an organizing opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it makes greed a not good thing because it's so nebulous and it's actually kind of just part of the human condition. So we needed to find that, and I think that so when I burnt out, then I went and I connected with the people that I was working with at school, and I started doing an education program. As I was leaving the steering committee of the Green Party, which was a complete burnout. Just so much. I'm on calls 5 nights a week, and I'm working full time, and I got married during that time period, and I came out there, and I was a member of the Young Eco-Socialists, which is the youth party or the youth caucus of the Green Party, and I ran a education program for them that was bi-weekly for a year and a half. And then the same thing has happened now after 2020, right? 2020 obviously was a complete burnout in terms of the amount of work that we had that goes into a presidential campaign. And I'm really, really happy with what we've been able to do. Right now we're doing we have a couple ongoing series. One is we call our 101s. We have one tomorrow, actually. So if you want to learn more about the Green Party and talk to Green Party organizers, tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 Eastern, we're going to have a Green Party 101 Zoom call with myself and Garrett Wasserman, who's a current GPUS coach, national co-chair, hosting. And we have a short presentation that's part of that's a trimmed down version of a long one we did 3 months ago. So we're going to do that, and then we're hoping to talk to people about the Green Party, answer their questions, and help them get organizing. And then in May, we'll do one on socialism, and in June, we'll do one on organizing. And those are recurring. Every 3 months, we go Green Party, socialism, organizing, Green Party, socialism, organizing. And we're the Green Socialist Organizing Project. So it makes sense why we chose those things. Those are key political education areas that we think need to hit the Green Party, right? People coming in need to be onboarded, and they need to understand what our politics and our history are, what our processes are. So once every 3 months, we have that opportunity for people to onboard with us with experienced green organizers. We're always pointing people to their local and state parties, right? That's where we want people to end up. We want people to understand what we mean when we say socialism, right?
I was just going to ask you as a segue. I'm like, okay, let's talk about socialism. How do you battle the negative perspective of that word? There's several false narratives going on in this country. What socialism is one of them. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, that's the problem, right? Like,
it's a huge problem.
So a lot of people give credit to Bernie Sanders for bringing the word socialism into the political discourse.
Yes, 100%.
And in a superficial way, I guess I can acknowledge that. But it also complicated things. And largely, I will say it's not Bernie's fault any more than he didn't stop it. But Bernie rarely talked about socialism, and even democratic socialism. It was his supporters and the organizations that threw their weight behind him, like DSA, that used that word a lot, right? Or that phrase a lot. Bernie Sanders didn't. Bernie Sanders talked
in interviews when he was pointedly asked, and then he would.
And it was usually someone said it to him, and then he defined something that was actually social democracy. But therein lies the problem, right? Because I actually think he did more damage than he did good, because it used to be mostly addressing the propaganda from the right, but now And I think it's a good illustration of why Greens are. We have a 35-year project of trying to siphon enough progressive Democrats out to become relevant, and it's a failed project. Mathematically, it's impossible, right? You can't take a minority of a minority party and become a majority. That's not how that works. Like the largest voting bloc every election is non-voters. That's where we need to focus. But one of the reasons, and people tend to think of like progressive Democrats as low-hanging fruit, but that the problem is there's usually a lot of baggage. That comes with it. And that's kind of happened. Bernie Sanders created a lot of noise and baggage on the left, and made it hard for anyone, not only the Greens, but anyone, to kind of get through the noise. And there are times when I'll be less generous to Bernie Sanders, and I'll say that he maliciously did it. That he is a capitalist. I don't. There's a different. I think we also need to understand Bernie Sanders, the candidate, is different than Bernie Sanders, the person. Okay. Bernie Sanders, the candidate, was a socialist of no kind. He was a social democrat. He advocated for social programs, and there's a minimal amount of public. His Green New Deal had the best public investment. It had the best understanding that we need public investment, not private investment, to get through the climate crisis. Better than the Thrive agenda that the Democrats have put out. Better than the non-binding Green New Deal of Marquez and AOC. Bernie's Green New Deal was pretty good. It was either half or a quarter of what Howie's was, but it was the best the Democrats had to offer. But outside of that, Bernie Sanders, the candidate, was Howie wrote an article and said Bernie Sanders is an old school New Deal liberal, because that's what he was, right? He's a social democrat, which is what that's where his politics are. Bernie Sanders, the person, might have or likely did at one time, rationally consider himself a socialist. I don't know how the thinking works once you've been in Washington for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right?
He also thought of that and he didn't even know it.
People said he was an outsider, and I'm like, he's been there 3 decades, guys. He's outside the establishment, but he's not an outsider, But, in the end, Bernie created a lot of confusion around what socialism is, and it's opened up, the field for these democratic, the front groups, basically, to kind of catch a good net, or cast a good net and pull people back into the Democratic Party when they become disenfranchised or disenchanted, and when they are considering socialism. And then it doesn't help that the Democrats are calling Biden a socialist. Right? So it's always been a problem in this country, right? Ever since, the Red Scares, plural, of the past, right? There's always been a misidentification of what socialism is. And, I know a guy who, he's a socialist organizer, and after a snow was out shoveling driveways, and he just told people, if you can pay me, if you can't, then shovel, right? Just like find me on, there's just people on Facebook asking for help, and he was helping, and probably pushed a dozen people out of the ditch. And one of the people they pushed out of the ditch, afterwards, hey, my name's Bob, shook his hand and said, this is my name, and he was taken aback, because he was a right-winger who knew him by right-winger reputations. And he said, well, that's not what I thought you would be like.
What, helpful?
Yeah. Kind, helpful, caring, all the things that socialism represents, right?
Yeah.
But he has no, he has heard, propaganda about this person and propaganda about this, these ideas, and it is.
Yeah, exactly. So that guy was probably like, I thought you'd be at home lazing around the house, on my dime, So, what are you doing here? Pulling, getting me out of a ditch. Yeah. Okay. No, that's a very good.
And it's why we started organizing in our communities, and we start by listening. and talking and having deep conversations, right? Because you don't, if you knock on the door and you wave a communist newspaper in someone's face, most people aren't interested, right?
They're gonna shoot you. I deliver pizzas in the winter just because I do horticulture in the summer, right? And there's like guy who orders all the time and literally says only you can stop socialism under his doorbell.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes out. He's a grumpy dude. If I said anything about what I think, he'd probably just punch me in the face. But
Yeah. But if you listen and you talk to people, and I've when I was community organizing, I was working in this neighborhood, and I knocked on this door, and I met a guy in his young black guy in his younger 20s. I just graduated with a degree in political philosophy. I was supposed to spend. I was the field director, so I could technically stay as long as I want and talk to someone if I thought they were good. But what I told my canvassers was, 5 minutes a door. You're not here to have deep conversations. We'll send an organizer or myself to have a deep conversation. But
okay.
I was training people, and I spent way too long at this door talking to this young guy. And we had these cards that we filled out, that people signed with some kind of pledge. I was working for an SEIU front at the time. They were funding a community organization that was paying me and my team. And so at the top of his, I wrote Foucault and doesn't know it. Because if through our conversation, you would be convinced that this young man had read Foucault's Knowledge Power, right? Something I studied in, I believe, both my postmodernism and my Marxism classes, right?
I took a class called Knowledge Power. It's
exactly. Yes. But the truth is, he hasn't. He lives in a working class black community that's oppressed by capitalism and oppressed by state power. He just gets it, right? And the working class get it, but they don't have and it's why, and they don't need. I'm someone, I've got a whole.
No, it's called. I don't know how much epistemology, but it's called epistemic privilege.
Yeah,
they know their own oppression.
Yeah, exactly, and it's it's one of the things that's messed up about our system is like I could speak about oppression and they could speak about oppression and people would think I knew more when I don't. Right? And it's like I can say pretty academic words. I can quote the right people, right? But they
which is still good. I don't want to totally dismiss that as like useless or anything.
I mean, I've pretty much rebelled against academia. I still have the whole shelf right here of political books, and there's more in piles downstairs. Yeah. It's not like I've walked away from it for myself, but it's like grammar Nazi people, like classist, racist bullshit. Right? If you can understand what someone said, they communicated it properly.
That's the only. Yeah, that's
exactly all that right.
Matters. They communicated it properly. That's exactly right. Yes.
And so when we're organizing, if we're people like me who have that theory background and have this training and understanding of the systems and how they work, that has been through a rigorous political education project, both myself and organizing it to help people. When you're talking to someone, all of a sudden, after a few conversations, you're going to be able to go, you're a socialist, right?
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I've had some conversations. I'm like, by the way, what you're just advocating for is socialism, just so you know. But okay.
And if you can get people to sit down and have a conversation about what you believe, not about rhetoric, then what you're going to find out is most, green policies are majoritarian policies, overwhelmingly. Over 50% of Democrats or Republicans want Medicare for all. Right?
I was going to ask you earlier if you had a number for Republicans. I'm assuming that at least some did. You think it's 50%? You think
it's over 50%, or it was in 2020. It was like 92% of Democrats and like 52 or 54% of Republicans.
See, that makes the whole issue even more baffling. That why it's not okay. Anyway.
Meanwhile, what? 10% of Congress does. I'm trying to. I don't know how to calculate the squad. And how do we know? Because it's not on the table. Progressive Democrats aren't putting this on the table. Medicare for not all is not something that's being put on the table. The Green New Deal is not something that's being put on the table. We're talking about Build Back Better, right? Here in Illinois, our Democrats are patting themselves on the back for their climate bill. Their climate bill gave twice the amount of money bailing out nuclear plants as it did the renewable subsidies.
No, I know. We had Joyce
Five
Mason.
billion over like the last uh, 10 years that we've built out on nuclear plants, right?
Yeah, no,
And
we
that's
had Joyce Mason.
environmental.
You know who Joyce Mason is?
No.
She's a U.S. state representative in Illinois. Here, she's got like what I don't know the number of the district, but it's like Zion and Winthrop Harbor. It's super northeast Illinois, and we had her on the show before, and I've had her on my radio show before, and she talks about how just dismal the outlook is in this state, and a lot of it was about nuclear power. She's very anti-nuclear power, um, you know, and but she's like, it's just my voice just goes unheard, and everybody's all about it. And she says she's ended up in the bathroom crying, just leaving the General Assembly because it's just so screwed up. Anyway, yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been both time and a relationship with Howie have turned me into a staunchly anti-nuclear advocate. The time thing is, like I said at the beginning of the show, we've got 8 years. It takes 10 plus years to get a nuclear power plant online, and that's
and the only real solution if nuclear is at all,
we're not building them because they're not economical.
No, they're a money pit. First of all,
Yeah.
Secondly, I mean, unless we get to the point of fusion, it doesn't matter, and then that might not even be right. But I mean,
Howie. It was funny because even Howie, who has been involved in anti-nuclear since the Clamshell Alliance, which he helped found, and they stopped plants from being built back then. But even Howie, you keep doing the research, right? You keep investing in the science and technology to move things forward. We just don't put these things in our communities. We don't put time bombs in our communities, right? I mean, we do all the time. We put nuclear plants in our communities. We put chemical plants in our communities. We put oil trains driving through our communities, right? We put time bombs through our communities on a daily basis. But
yeah, it's disgusting. There's an Albert Shaw here. Hello, Albert. Thanks for joining in. He has a question, it seems like. Without a Green Party member on the ballot for governor, should the Greens run a write-in candidate and run a low-key campaign to get some votes generated?
So I mean, first I'll address why there's not a Green Party candidate on the going for governor, and that's because we have to collect 25,000 signatures, doubled to 50 because they will challenge them. That's just the general rule. You have to double it. We have in 90 days, so we have to collect 50,000 signatures in 90 days, and that takes not just a good candidate, but a candidate with a network, a candidate that has support existing. It's a huge undertaking to pull it off. One of the hardest in the nation, right? On the idea of a write-in, we could. I think that is where a dynamic social media firebrand type candidate could play, right? The candidate that will play on a write-in campaign probably isn't the candidate that can get on the ballot, that has this organization necessarily the different skill set to have to do that to logistically get that done. But when you're running write-in, it's just about getting your name out there. So you can run a totally different kind of candidate in that situation. I'm generally against write-in candidates. The main reason being, if you couldn't get on the ballot, how are you expecting to have a good result? And basically my thought process there is, more building needs to happen before we're ready to run for that race. Okay. And a big part of it is that we face this incredible hurdle for all of it, right? And 2022 is a different year where our state house candidate or our congressional candidates only have to get 5,000 signatures, and our state house only have to get 1,500. and that's because of the redistricting. Um, when the map changes, it resets to like the neutral way of the law. But after this election, we'll go back to incredibly repressive ballot access laws in most partisan races. So, like to run in my 13th district in 2020, for a Republican and Democrat, it took about 750 to 800 signatures. For Green, it took 16,000.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
So that's it's really hard here in Illinois, and this is why the kind of eternal green debate of electoral or movement is a bad debate, because it's electoral and movement, right? We need to build power first here before we can hope to have success electorally, apart from some kind of random thing happening and something going viral or whatnot. But one thing I do think is interesting for Greens and third parties is to run a campaign for undervoting. Run a campaign where you leave it blank, because none of these candidates are acceptable to me. It's something that's recorded. It's something that could already shows up in large numbers. It's something that already shows up that we could coordinate with, like, the Libertarian Party, for instance, and possibly move the needle, right, from what is a normal, because like I said, it already happens. I already do it. I don't vote for anyone I don't believe in. So I've literally gone in and turned in a blank ballot when for local stuff. So
really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the machine's like, wait a minute. And I'm like, I know. And it's like, wait a minute. And I'm like, I know. And then it's like, okay. But it's something that's recorded. And if we can get a sizable portion of the electorate voting and saying none of these options are, because the thing about a write-in is that it's thrown away. In Illinois, I believe they're counted. I believe they have to be registered, though. So all those people who just write in someone spoil their ballot.
That's really interesting. I never heard of that. I'm sure you probably know a lot of political strategy. Clearly, you do. Just from talking to you, but because of your the political philosophy. That's a really interesting thing. Like, I'm just to keep the math simple. Like 100 ballots are counted, and of two candidates, say they each get 25 votes. And there's there's 50 not votes there. I think that would really make people go, huh? That's interesting. Well, what just happened here? That's very cool. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and personally, I think every election should have a none of the above. They have it in Nevada. It's the only state place.
Do they really? Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, like Albert said, they have to register in each county. So you can't just write someone in, you spoil your ballot. And so with none of the above, the idea is if none of the above wins, there's an immediate snap election. On a very short time scale, and the people who ran before can't run again, because no one wanted them. I can say, because we have it internally in the Green Party, it is the funnest campaign to run. I've won one time. We won by one vote, none of the above, and forced a new election, and then we got our person elected in the second election.
That's awesome.
Basically, that was political strategy. We didn't have someone we thought could beat their number one. So we let their number one run unopposed against none of the above, and we whipped enough one of the aboves that we eliminated their number one from the next election, and we were able to win with our number one.
Look, that's impressive. I like that.
And the funny thing, it wasn't. We all liked their number one.
Well,
he was a new guy. He was a new person. It was like, this is like inside baseball party committee stuff, where there was just a current in the party or in the committee of, we don't want the same old people running it. We want someone new. So it was just a very weird, but it was a lot of fun. One of the most fun whipping.
Nice. That's very cool. It is. I can't even believe this. It's the show's already over. Like, I feel like we're just still in the midst of, like, the introduction. So I guess we can do another minute or two, but we didn't get to some of the things I wanted to talk about. This was a great conversation. Don't get me wrong, but I think that just simply means, Chris, that you need to stick around after we end the broadcast here, and we need to sign you in for another date so we can talk more.
Yeah,
Because
for
you
sure.
obviously are the guy to talk to about all this stuff. That's very cool. So anyway, real quick, I know that we got something here in private chat. The spring convention.
Yeah, you can go to ilgp.org, and right at the top you'll see a banner for the spring convention. Our spring convention is on Saturday via Zoom. It starts at 10:30 a.m. with business meeting in the morning. That's mainly going to entail internal elections for 2 co-chairs, a secretary, a treasurer, and a membership steward, and then representatives to the Green Party. Um, the Green Party US's national committee. So the way the Green Party works is our national party. We're a federation. And so the members of the Green Party nationally are actually the state parties and the caucuses. No person can be a member, right? And so how it works democratically is there's a formula, and it tells us based on past election results and things like that how many delegates we get. And Illinois sends delegates to the national committee and alternates, and then they make decisions on the national level regarding things like platform and statements and that kind of stuff. So that's the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's kind of going to be focused towards campaigns because it's the beginning of a number of our green campaigns. But a lot of, at least on my part, a lot of what's going to be talked about is really useful for generally organizing your local. So we're going to have Steve Alish from DuPage County do he has a tool called Campaign in a Box, and it's basically a Google folder that has everything you need to run your campaign, checklists, and making sure you've got everything in place. After that, I'm going to be doing an internal training on how to use our database system, which, like I said, it's inside baseball, but it's things our campaigns need to know. So that's why we're looking at it. And it's good for our locals to use this stuff too. And then I'm going to be doing a workshop on campaign communications with AJ Reed. AJ is going to talk about kind of old media, new media, how to do that kind of thing as a campaign, and then I'm going to talk about social media.
Very cool.
That, and then Illinois has this really unique thing called the township initiatives. And basically every year we can put things on our ballots by collecting signatures locally and having them voted at a township meeting in April. So that just happened. So there's going to be a report back about that from people who did it and things like that. So that's Saturday. Business meeting starts at 10:30. Afternoon training sessions start at 1. So there's all of that. That's going on Saturday, and it's a good. I always tell people, don't just have business meetings. That runs people off. Not everybody wants to sit through a business meeting. So, this kind of stuff is something you're interested in. Absolutely come. If not, look for other opportunities. That I know, Anna in DuPage County, who's running for state house, is doing a healthcare forum coming up and things like that. So that's one of the key things about green organizing is we've got to give people lots of ways to engage. So one of the ways is to come on Saturday and come to your first green convention.
There you go. All right, very cool. All right, Chris Blankenhorn, thank you so much for joining us, and again, stick around. And we're gonna get you back on because as far as I'm concerned, we didn't even start the conversation. We just caught up with it. That's awesome, which is very cool. Thank you everybody for joining us here at the Illinois Green Party Series. I'm your host David Rich. Till next time, be good, be green.
Peace.